Oi, oi, hello and welcome back to day three's preview of the Cheltenham Festival for Which Bookie. It's myself, Dave Young, and Will Smith once again. If you haven't already checked out day one and day two, watch this first and then you can go back and check those out. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel because as much as we will be covering the handicaps in this race, we are going to do a live preview on the Sunday before Cheltenham, Sunday the 9th, where we will have confirmations for day one, declarations in. We'll have a better idea of where horses are going. We'll know more on Weather Watch, and we will run through every single race, but we'll be giving you a more definitive selection. That doesn't mean, though, that we're not going to find you a few winners in this preview. So as I say, make sure you subscribe to the channel, drop a like on the video, drop a comment below if you're that way inclined, and we shall get started with the Mares Novices Hurdle for Thursday, day three. This is a real good competitive day's racing, I think, at Cheltenham. I think if you were an average race goer and you just wanted to go to a day at the meeting where potentially a few gambles might be landed, or you wanted to get a few, I guess, better value price favourites. And like value is obviously like in the eye of the beholder, but maybe some like bigger price favourites, I suppose, going in. It's real competitive action on there. Gets kicked off this year with the Mares Novices Hurdle. There's two horses right at the front of the market, vying for favouritism. 6.5 for Gavin Cromwell and Maureen, who's related to Forheen the Machine, named after Willie Mullins' mum, part of a racing syndicate that Willie Mullins has got touted for, or even the champion bumper last year, but touted for this race from a very long way out. Now, we've seen both of them over hurdles once. We've seen some of the others in the field over the hurdles multiple times. The market seems pretty headstrong that the winner comes from these two, though. If you were to back the pair, it pays even money, doesn't it, if you get a 3-1 each of them? And I'll be honest with you, Will, I keep going back and forth and I can't really work out which one of them's the better one. And that makes me nervous because I feel like if I'm whittling out between a couple of them and I can't find the best, I wonder if the bar they're setting isn't high enough. But as much as it is the Cheltenham Festival, and I don't want to be rude to any of the horses, it is a grade 2 and it is Mares Novice as well. So maybe the bar that I'm looking for horses to set doesn't need to be as high as I'm trying to get it to be. I thought Maureen was okay on hurdles debut, got the job done, but I'm again reading into stuff that probably isn't there. But I definitely don't think she's done enough to warrant being the price she is, as much as the hype's pushed her into that sort of price. And I do wonder whether being, like I say, well-related and well-named and with a big syndicate, whether Willie's been a bit protective maybe of her. I know she's had a few issues as well, but if she'd have been exposed in a better race by now, she may have got beaten, which wouldn't have meant she couldn't come here and won the race. But I wonder whether he's minded a little bit of that in view to come into Cheltenham for his new syndicate, to have a favourite for Cheltenham with a good chance, and the bubble might burst here. I'm definitely being harsh because he's entitled to improve from it. And with normal trajectory, she should be able to surpass what 6.5 has done. But 6.5 is better than Maureen on what she's shown so far. Go back through some of her bumper form as well, even back in the good old days when she beat Cole Cannon, that was well backed at the Dublin Race Festival bumper. She's got some actual depth in there. She's the type of horse I wonder if we were to look back in a few years' time, you'd be like, geez, we knew she was quite good. This was the start of something. So I feel like she's the one that potentially could turn into something really special. I don't see that absolute star quality from Maureen, for all that I do respect her and the Master of Clasutton. He used to win this race all the time, didn't he? It was just whatever Willie Mullins trained beginning with the letter L, but he hasn't won the last 5 renewals. I think 6.5 deserves to be shorter in the market than Maureen, but I don't think she deserves to be shorter than she is at the moment, if you know what I mean. I think Maureen should be a bit of a bigger price. But I'd probably, with all that said, I'd probably happily say that I'd bet the pair at even money against the field rather than try and find something to take them on, especially at this stage, because there's only 3 places up for grabs, none run of money back. The ones in behind, I think, are all much of a muchness. So did you have I don't know, I don't want to say a more aggressive view, but did you have a stronger view in here of how to split those front 2 at least?
No, I didn't. I must admit. I think they've both got some real, solid qualities for this particular race that we've seen recently. That's a key thing with them. Obviously, Maureen only one start this season. Has that been because she's had issues, or is that because maybe she's just a late maturing 6-year-old that Willie Mullins wants to campaign patiently? And he's worked wonders with the likes of Quevega and various other horses, in a similar kind of ilk, really. So you'd expect her to be there or thereabouts, definitely. 6.5 was really good on hurdle debut, classy flat horse. Just the one worry with her is that she looks a stayer to me. Now, you generally need a staying type to win this. It's 2 miles, 1 furlong on the new course. So it's going to be a staying test, particularly for young mares. But, you know, she ran in Cesarowicz's and things over in Ireland. So, you know, real proper stayer. I think she'll be better, or she'll be seen to best effect when she goes over 2.5 miles over hurdles. But her ability in her class will probably carry her through here. So, yeah, and beyond that, you're looking at Jubilee Alpha for Paul Nicholls, who's looked the best, I think, of the UK challengers. She was good at Taunton and then good at Windsor. Just a small bit of a worry in terms of how some of Paul Nicholls' horses are running at the minute. They might be fine in a couple of weeks' time, so might be overthinking that one. And if you like Jubilee Alpha, you've got to like one or two other horses that fit in with her, the likes of Holly Grove Cha, who won at Sandown quite nicely for Jamie Snowden, and also Emma Lavelle's Bluey. Don't know if this is the plan for her, but she's the type of horse that could run a decent race at a big price. I think she's qualified for some of the sort of EBF mares handicaps and things like that. So that's probably more likely her target. But I think she's, you know, she'll probably be a horse that's overlooked in the market wherever she goes. But a bit more of a watching brief for this race at this stage. It'll all become clearer in 10 days to 12 days time or so.
Yeah, fingers crossed. It's a race that I've been, like I said, it started off quite easy with just whatever Willie Mullins was sending there, and he had some proper recruits going in there as well, didn't he? Let's Dance, Limini and Lorena, but the quality hasn't been as good. But then in saying that, like Honeysuckle should have come here the year that Pertemps got beat, and then you've got two Champion Hurdle winners that could have come in here, but neither of those won. You've got Brighter Days Ahead that got turned over last year, and obviously you can see what she's doing now. So it's not even necessarily that of like a case of finding the best horse in the race. It's a case of finding the best horse in the race for that day, isn't it? And those conditions.
Yeah, with those Willie Mullins horses, they only proved themselves to be class horses in this event and further down the line. We didn't know that they were at that stage. And, you know, there've been some big priced winners of the race. Eglantine de Soy, you know, you can forget her. And there's still a couple of horses in the entries who haven't even made their debut for Willie Mullins yet, who are French recruits. So, you know, who's to say? Yeah, real unknown quantities at this stage, but the two at the top look the solid ones.
Yeah, that's it. And it's, again, one of those in the staking order. This will be one lower down in terms of how much risk I'd want to get involved in it. Did get a little bit too much probably into Brighter Days Ahead last year, although I thought I was on to a winner. But that's where, like you say, with 6.5 being a staying type, and it can suit those types, it does really depend what happens on the day, because they just went a crawl last year and it turned into a sprint. And you can plan as much as you think this should happen on this course and in these conditions, and then on the day something else happens. So typically with, I'd say, championship races, and I don't want to be mean to this race, it sounds like I'm like picking on it, but in the grade 1 races, the tempos and the styles that they're running, you can predict if it's going to be a bad year for that. Whereas sometimes in this instance, there maybe just isn't enough depth in there for them to be able to go the right sort of clip. Whereas in another year, there may have been more depth and they could have gone a different pace. So yeah, definitely waffling too much about the mares. Novice. It's a good looking race. It's one of those. I want to find the winner of all of them, but I'll have to just accept defeat on this one. That I've got no conviction, and that's probably, I think that will stay the way through to the declaration as well for me, I think. Right, one that I've surely should have some conviction in is the new Jack Richards Novices Handicap Chase. Should be easy. Well, we used to have this race before, so should just be the same type, shouldn't it? We have to remember that, of course, a Plutard won that old one, didn't he? And by had stones and stones and stones in hand. So you always try and look for that type of horse, I guess, in a Novices Handicap Chase that is really well handicapped and miles ahead of their mark. But again, you don't know until you know, if you see what I mean. But sometimes the market does speak favourably. So again, I'll just mention that we will be doing a live on Sunday the 9th on the Which Bookie channel, so make sure you subscribe for that. And then these handicaps, once we're much closer to the event, we will have probably much more conviction in there. But I'd say in this race, Will, they could get split up between this and the plate. That's happened in the past as well, when you used to have the Close Brothers Novices Chase on the Tuesday, because they're a similar trip, but those switches used to happen because it was the new course versus the old course. Both being on the new course, I'd imagine, unless they don't get in, that most of the novices would probably go in the novice race, unless Connections suspected that the plate would be the easier target. But I mean, you can't say that for any race at Cheltenham. You can't cherry pick any of them, I don't suppose. But Jaguar probably wasn't supposed to win according to the market last time, but did win. Head in the market, another JP horse that's quite short. He's interesting, but I don't know how much more he's probably got in hand. Firefox was one that was on my radar for this race, because when they started at the beginning of the season over the middle trip, I thought, what are you doing? This potentially should be an Arkle horse. And then when they dropped him back in trip the first time, I thought, well, it wasn't a bad run because they've been racing the middle trip, and maybe next time at 2 miles he'll show that 2 mile like class again. And then he didn't do it the next time after. So now I think, all right, well, you've made him a 2.5 miler. Let's stand him in that sort of stead. And I think if the ground came up goodish, he's the type of horse that could just be quicker and better than some of these in the finish. But he's very defensively priced. I think he's a top price 10-1 for this race at the time of recording. So we're doing this on the 21st. The one that I did think was worth a bit of a mention, but takes a little bit of convincing, I guess, is Peaky Boy, that was absolutely slammed in that Reynoldstown at the weekend. Because part of the reason why I fancied the Changer Man so much in there was I didn't think the Peaky Boy really wants the 3 mile trip. That was his first run for the new yard after leaving Nicky Henderson. So, with no disrespect to the yard, it is a downgrade in that first instance from where he'd been running before to where he's been going after. But I think his couple of runs at this course and distance earlier in the season are fairly good, and there's enough in there to suggest that he probably is still well handicapped. And I remember a couple of years ago when Sky Pirate was sold mid-season at a sale as well. They picked him up in the sales, kept him in the same yard, didn't change that time round. But they went and won a Grand Annual with him the same season by doing something different and changing the trip. He'd been running at 3 miles the whole time. That one's slightly different, though, because it was John Joe O'Neill running him at 3 miles, and then John Joe O'Neill dropped him back to 2 miles. So that probably says as much as you want to know about him. But in this instance, I think he's not without a chance. Admittedly, he's got to do a lot better than he did last time in the Reynoldstown, but he's about a 25-1 shot, non-runner money back. I'd imagine if they think they've got a handicap in him, they'd enter it. Well, if they've entered him, they'd run him in here if he's got a chance, rather than running him in here to hide him. If you see what I mean, because he has got good form at Cheltenham. So if they didn't run him, I think doesn't mean he's a bad horse. I think they're just saving him for another day. If they did declare him, I would be interested in him. I think he could be a bit of a fly in the ointment, but it's reaching to say that Peaky Boy, after his performance, has got a chance in this race. It looks like it's going to be a pretty deep one, Will. Did you manage to make a short list or a long short list?
A long short list, yeah. In regards to Peaky Boy, I mean, that run at Ascot was a third run over fences to qualify for this race. So, you know, the stable have only just acquired him. You know, nice quiet run just to blow a few cobwebs away. I wouldn't look into the performance too much from that particular race. I mean, when a horse goes to the sales, change of routine, etc., you know, if this is a fairly short-term plan, admittedly, then it's one that they've got, you know, a chance to potentially have a go at. Jaguar, yeah, he looks good. He'll be, I imagine, you know, he probably wasn't 100% the other day when he won. I think his raw ability carried him through on that occasion, and he won, you know, very, very easily. Handicap probably could have gone a bit more overboard, actually. Hasn't been too unkind, I must admit. And he's the obvious one, isn't he? But sometimes the obvious ones aren't the ones to go with in this particular instance. Plenty of those at bigger prices that make some kind of appeal. And I think there'll probably be bigger prices on the day and more places as well. So I wouldn't maybe suggest going in with them now. But I mentioned one horse in respect to the Arkle on the day one preview for Joseph O'Brien, which is Jordan's. He's probably more likely to turn up here. He's had the requisite number of runs to get into the race. He ran a cracker, I thought, in the Grade 1 at Limerick at Christmas time behind Ampere Pass, when he sort of just sidled through the race in the rear and then showed a nice turn of foot late on, actually, to run down Search for Glory for second. I think generally, that was a pretty strong piece of form. I know Ampere Pass was beaten at the DRF, but you know, he was beaten by a very good horse, and he's never really been as good at Leopardstown, I don't think, that horse, Ampere Pass, anyway. So, you know, that's Grade 1 form. Much will depend on what the handicapper does with him. You'd imagine the mark will be probably mid-140s, but, you know, that'll be fine. This will be a classier renewal than it has done previously because it's open-ended at the top. So I bet we'll find plenty of these types of horses running in it, and we'll find the record of winners will probably be those classier types as we go through the years with it. Beyond that, Jordan's, and there was one other one actually to make a mention of, but again, probably bigger price on the day, probably extra places. The Company Sergeant for Gavin Cromwell. He's not had the horse long. He's only had one run for him, which came in a handicap hurdle back at Navan, I think it was about a month or so ago. If you look at some of this horse's form in graded races when trained by Dennis Hogan, very, very strong form behind the likes of Spillans Tower in Grade 1s, Ashdale Bob, decent races. Again, Handicap will have a hand to play, but it was extremely well backed for that debut for Gavin Cromwell over hurdles. He ran maybe just as if fitness was race fitness was a bit of an issue late on. But he's definitely a horse to keep half an eye on because he's the type that Gavin Cromwell will squeeze some more out of.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just pulled up on the Racing Post now because I'd had him on my notes to mention, and you've done the deal there. Well, I was going back for his form as well because he's behind Ashdale Bob and things like that, and then I saw he was behind that Mr. Policeman. I was like, we won't mention that one. But yeah, but the switch of yards, and Gavin Cromwell as well has been in very good form this season. He's done a real good Christmas, didn't he? I don't think he's an underrated trainer because people know how good he is, but he's been targeting more and more at these big meetings. He's getting a bit of ammunition for it, and I think he's found a bit of a system with some of these horses that come in to know which sort of paths or routes to go. So yeah, he's been like the subject of some interest on the exchange as well for both this and the plate. I think he's got a Coral Cup entry too, but you'd imagine they must be going back over fences with him, given that what his preference is. Excellent. Right. Well, we'll move on now to the Pertemps. This has got to be an easy one to solve, isn't it? Well, we've only got 4 qualifiers from, 4 horses could qualify from each of the heats now. It's a win and you're in as long as you're rated high enough. It's a mess of a race as far as I'm concerned. This is one like you talked about with Presenting Percy years ago when he came and won it. You look at the weight and they were even the talk and everything, and they still knew he was going to win and they got stuck in, didn't they? And then I feel like it's one of these races, Will, don't know if you're of a similar ilk, but the plotty conspiracy type horses, potentially you can sometimes find them early on and you might get a few value losers from it, but then you do just seem to get a lot of winners that are just completing our afterthoughts and they've tried something, it all doesn't go well, and then they come and win it after. Because I tipped up Monmoral to win an Arco a few years ago and he won the Pertemps last year. That's the type of horse I think that can end up going in here. So the Wall Park is worth mentioning for the fact that he's in the Stairs hurdle as well. He's bought by JP. You'd think that he'd be going to the Stairs. All the talk is that he's going to the Stairs, but it would be very notable if they decided to come here instead, I would have thought, just for the fact that they think he can run it to a close number to Tiapu. Then they might be thinking, well, actually, he might be able to do enough in here to go and win it. Because you don't need to have bundles in hand, I wouldn't say, on there. You just need to be primed, peaked, and in decent form coming into it. So he'll be interesting. But he's one of 3 for JP, isn't he? Win some, lose some. Jericho de Repene, that was, I want to say, apparently eye-catching. He did stay on at the end, didn't he? But he looked like he was well beat halfway through the race as well. So he must have gone, not that they have the anti-post books up, but if there was in-running betting on the Pertemps in that race, he would have gone 1,000 at some point, wouldn't he? And now he's 7-1 at the front of the market, having started as a novice chaser. He's got form, isn't he, to suggest that he could be well handicapped, but he's also got form to suggest that he's not a horse you'd want to be betting to win a race of this nature. So there's got to be something at a bit of a price further down. As much as I poo-poo Jericho de Repene, the one that I half like and I have had an interest on was Shanna Bob, because they put the cheap pieces on for his qualifier. That worked lovely for him. The 2 times over fences, I bet him first time up. And for all he looked like he was going to make, like he was every inch a chaser while he was hurdling, he just looked nothing like a chaser when he went over it first time. And I wonder whether he's maybe like I wouldn't necessarily say green, but maybe he's just not the most intelligent horse. But again, I don't want to be harsh to him. I just mean there might be something in him. When he was babyish and green, when he won that Grade 2 Bristol Novices hurdle at Cheltenham, where he beat Destroy the Evidence. So even on that form, like, you know that he's potentially got to be a 140s horse. He looked babyish and green, didn't he? But I actually start to wonder now, maybe he is just that type of horse. Maybe he's just, I don't know, a bit like fumbly or any of that sort of stuff. But the cheap pieces seemed to straighten him up in that Pertemps qualifier. Then they had to quickly run him in the Plumpton race, I think it was, or wherever it was. They ran him over 2 mile 5 just because he needed a 5th run to get into this race because the new rules have changed. So you can definitely ignore that. The fact they took the cheap pieces back off and he still ran okay was like a slight positive in there. I think he's just the right type of horse that you'd look at and say he is a well-handicapped horse and maybe this will work. But as I said, with horses like Monmoral that go and win this one, and even though in hindsight Presenting Percy was well-handicapped, he seemingly wasn't well-handicapped. It doesn't always go to the horse in this race that you look at and think they've got stones in hand, does it? It just goes to the horse that is going to win the race, which I know sounds really obvious, but I think I can make a bit of a case for Shanna Bob. It is another one of those that I would very rarely get heavily involved in. I've backed many a value loser in this, Will. I've backed a few each way as well that have never even placed, so probably not the best person to judge on this one. Have you got a bit more of a bullish opinion in here, or are you of a similar vein that it's a hard one?
I wouldn't be bullish, like we said, with a number of these races, when we get nearer the time, confirmed runners, confirmed ground, etc., confirmed stable form. But two that were on my radar definitely are Doddy the Great, who was second in the qualifier at Haydock last weekend, who has been, this season has just been a complete write-off, to be fair to him. He debuted over fences at Kempton, didn't really take to them. Pulled up then back over hurdles at Kempton at Christmas time when not done too many favours by the starter and was left at the start. Pulled up at Ascot behind Alta Belly. That was a bit of a blip. Don't know what went wrong there. But he ran a massive race in cheap pieces behind One Big Bang last time out. Travelled so well in those cheap pieces. Was very, very weak in the market. So the run wasn't really expected, which I always like when the horse does that and there's a bit to work on. And they show up really nicely and at a big price. So he was definitely of interest. He's got form behind Go Dante in a 2-mile handicap hurdle back here at Cheltenham as well. So he's got track form. Nicky Henson has a decent old record in this race, actually, with horses that he's run fairly recently to get qualified. Remember, I think it was a Call the Cops one a couple of years ago, having won a Doncaster qualifier. Jericho de Repenay would be in that particular bag as well. You've definitely got to note his run at Exeter, I'd suggest. And the other one was Ollie Murphy's horse, Long Draw. We haven't seen him for 2.5 months, but the last run of a busy autumn period, he qualified by finishing 4th in the qualifier at Wincanton. I imagine he's been freshened up. He's got good course form at Cheltenham. He won a good 3-mile handicap here, beating Gal Road. I think he's going to be a horse that will be produced fresh and ready on the day. So he could be one that plenty of people have forgotten about, but gradually might start to come back into people's realms of thinking.
Oh, good man, Will. I'm glad you said that as well, because another friend of mine messaged me yesterday making a case saying that I've got to have at least a holding bet on Long Draw. And then I saw Ollie Murphy being interviewed yesterday talking about his Cheltenham chances, and he didn't mention the horse in there. Wonder whether his mark might be on the low side to get him in. And I wonder whether that quick turnaround, I don't know whether because they ran him in the qualifier, I wonder if they tried to win one to get him in or to get his mark moved. But he's definitely of interest. But don't know, it might be Ollie Murphy to run him at Aintree, wouldn't it? But again, we mentioned this on some of the other races as well. There are horses that are being mentioned in here that even if they don't go in at Cheltenham, not that we'll claim the wins forevermore, but these are spring festival type horses that we probably have been aimed at something. So Long Draw's definitely got to have a bit of a squeak. If he turns up here, I think he'd be quite a fancy, wouldn't he? Don't know how much I trust Ollie Murphy to try to Cheltenham Festival winner at the moment, though. That'd be my only thing. So maybe if he does send into Aintree, it'd be a better option. But like I said, I'm glad you mentioned it after getting some conversation with someone about that yesterday too. Yeah. Right, we will move on to the Ryanair Chase. This, of all the races on Thursday, this one will surely, it's a grade 1. It should be easy to solve, dare I say. At the stage that we're recording this one, we could record this probably or when we do the live preview on the Sunday, which, like I say, subscribe to the channel, you get notified about that. We could do the preview on the Sunday. We might still not know who's going to run in this one, in fairness. But we've got Factorfile, sort of a shortish price favourite in here. I say a shortish price, 7-4 top price he is. Ile Francais, top price 4-1 in behind, although 7-2 non-runner money back. Gaelic Warriors, 7-2. Protector at 6-1. Banbridge is 5s, even though they said they're going to go Gold Cup. Spillane's Towers 5, although Jimmy Manga said he might not travel with him again. Jello's 12-1. El Fabiolo 7s. Energumene 7-1. You mentioned the overround on some of the races earlier, but this is typically always the same in a Ryanair because you just got to try and work out who's going to run. This year's a bit harder to do that. I think for me, it's a case of if Factorfile runs it, I think he's got a magnificent chance of doing this. I think after his John Durkan win earlier this season and what he's done since, he's shown everything at the moment is that he doesn't want to be going on a Gold Cup trip. And this would be the better option for him. Even when Valtor came and won this race in the past, you looked at it after his King George run and think, well, they should have run him in a Gold Cup. I'm wondering if that's what Factorfile end up looking like. He'll win this and everyone will be like, oh, you should have put him in against Galopin Des Champs. But they're different disciplines completely, aren't they? Ile Francais, the fact the connections keep saying they'll go there if Factorfile doesn't, I feel like is a bit of, I don't know, like some sort of like pre-festival banter where they're basically just trying to make sure Factorfile doesn't come to this race. Because this would be Ile Francais' best chance of the festival. I'd love to see him ripping off from the front. So I'd say whichever one of those two comes, I'd fancy. There is a world where they both do come. On the exchanges, I was looking at the, especially the Gold Cup betting without Galopin Des Champs. and you can get 8 or 9 to 1 for Factifal without Galopin de Champs, which would scream out to me that he can't be going to the Gold Cup, because even for small stakes, he's weak on there. He's like 25s, 28s for the Gold Cup market. And while he can still get a bigger than the 6-4, 7-4 he is in this race on the exchanges, he is shortening up for that race. So I think Factifal comes here. So I'm basing my judgment off the back of that, Will. If Factifal and Ile France go against each other, how do I split them? I don't know the answer, because Ile France should love it, provided he handles the undulations. And does he just set it up for Factifal, or does Factifal just not have the ability to rein him in?
It's hard to say. I mean, Ile France is very much an all or nothing horse, isn't he? He has bled in the past. He needs decent ground to be seen to best effect. I think in a proper Grade 1 championship race, that's what he needs. I don't know. He's a horse for me that I don't think I'll ever find myself backing him, just because there is that worry that he could bomb out. And you don't quite know when that's going to happen. And in the better races, there's more likelihood of that happening. Around Cheltenham, an undulating track that he's never encountered before, might be on ground softer. Well, so you'd imagine will be on ground softer than it was at Christmas time. It's not for me. He could put some excitement into the race, though, with that style. I mean, that would be fascinating to watch. Factifile, I think, is inherently an intermediate trip horse. I think he's a quicker horse than a Gold Cup horse needs to be. Actually, having said that, Gold Cup horses need to be quick. With Factifile, I don't think he's a cast iron stayer. That's the thing for me. He and I think even in last year's Brown Advisory, his turn of foot and his pace won him that race against what were, if you're looking back now, with all due respect, not top-notch Grade 1 staying chasers. He just sidled around, and then Mark Walsh pressed the button and he went and won. So I think what he's done this season in the John Durkan and then twice at Leopardstown have suggested that the Ryanair has to be his race. So if he turns up, mightily hard to beat. If he doesn't, Protectorate looks the solid one, really. Winner of the race last year. He's tuned up for it nicely. He looks as if his season's peaking just right. Still maintain the view that last year's Turner's Novice Chase was actually a better race than the Ryanair. It was run a lot quicker. But for various reasons, Ginny's Destiny, the wheels have come off. Grey Dawning's not going to come to Cheltenham, presumably. So it might be left to the third horse home that day, Jello, to be an interesting option. But I don't think Cheltenham and left-handed is really absolutely his bag. I know he won at Newbury in the Denman Chase, but I think he's better right-handed. So he could hit the frame. But really, for me, Factifile, if he runs here, it's pretty solid option.
I like that, Will, because I feel like that too, because the Ile France thing, the way you worded that there, the excitement of him being in the race, I think that's probably what's taken over, even with me to an extent, because again, when you bring up about the fact that he's bled in the past and he's bombed out on a few races or whatever, like this is the ultimate test, even for the fact that it isn't a Champion Chase and it isn't a Gold Cup. This Ryanair has now turned into a seriously good contest. And when we talk about the depth in that Champion Chase, and obviously there are good horses, we've got an abundance of horses that are rated at a similar figure. I know some of them are like doubly entered, aren't they? Because they've talked about El Fabiolo coming in, haven't they? I think he'd be very interesting as a bit of a price, although coming in off the back of a fall's nowhere near ideal.
No.
But he's very defensively priced as well. He's only a top price 7-1 non-runner money back. My worry with Protectorate is exactly as you said, with the comparatively to the Turners as well. I fancied him for it last year, and obviously got the job done. Again, blowing the trumpet type stuff. I kind of want to still be on side of him, but I feel like, especially with the fact that if Ile France is in here, Protectorate's going to have no sort of race like he did last year. It'll be something that he doesn't like. And when they ran him at Windsor, for all that he doesn't like going right-handed, and for all that Harry Skelton was bonkers to hold him up at the back or whatever, they've talked about him being a horse that does fight against him a bit as well, don't they? So it's that. I think it's hard enough to go and win once at Cheltenham Festival. I don't think I could trust him to back it up, but that's not me trying to put people off of him. Just think at the 6-1 about him. It's almost I feel like he's almost a selection you kind of fall back on, as opposed to anyone really wants to believe that he's going to go and win this race. But this looks a real class one. I really do just hope the Factifile comes here, because I think, like you said, the intermediate trips is what he's made for. His John Durkan run, the start of the season, made him favourite for the Gold Cup, which is balmy considering the trip that it's over. But we know how that suits those type of staying types. But now when you sit back and, the 6-4 about him is probably the right sort of price where he should be. But given these last couple of runs, and it's been over further trips, you'd kind of think, or you'd hope that the bookies would have given us a bit more juice about him. But maybe I'm being a bit tight on there and trying to ask for everything. I think he might just be like a Valtour again, going at even money, and you look back after and think, why did I not have more on? So fingers crossed that file comes in. If he doesn't, then Lord knows, they've all got a chance, haven't they? So we'll leave it as that. But again, from those like ones that are the shorties in there, I feel like he's in and around the right sort of price, like similar like a John Bon. I want a little bit more, but I'm definitely being greedy. But like, he's got a good chance, hasn't he?
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Speaking of good chances, Will, we're onto the stairs hurdle. Tiapu, I think like this is the race where, depending on when in the season you'd have asked me about it, I would have said the same things, but I would have been preempting my views in the future. And I think it's happened pretty well, to be fair. Now, Tiapu's never, for me, been a juicy price anti-post, with the fact that he does get kept fresh, and the fact that we get a whole season of horses trying to throw their sort of hats into the ring to go and win this race. And for all I think he'll be fine on better ground, he would probably prefer it softer. I mean, that dampens the chances of a lot of his opponents in there as well. But the closer you get to the event, his prices can only get shorter, really, unless some standout star comes. And it has started to collapse. So he's now available at 11-10, so still odds against. But I think it was about 11-8 on the exchange yesterday, but there was quite a bit of money trying to back him at 6-4. And of course, last year he got absolutely hammered on the off, went into 5-4, I think, in the end. But he was available at 5-2 when I was doing the previews about this time last year. So he's always been a bit short, but this is easier than last year by some way. I know he's run behind Lossiemouth. Gordon Elliott's saying it's as good as it was last year when he beat Imperial Pass. I don't think it was. It wasn't as good as last year's run. But you can't judge what he's going to do in the spring on the back of that, because he is a horse that goes well fresh. But there's reasons why I can see why people would want to take him on a little bit. It's just the problem now that the prices that everything is in behind, they're probably a bit of a muchness, dare I say. Home by the Lees had 3 cracks at this race, and if it came up good ground, I'd say, okay, there's the scenario where he might be able to do better than he's done in the past. But if it's not that type of ground, can't win the race as far as I'm concerned. So you wouldn't want to play him as the safe each way alternative. He'd be like a Mr. Coffee probably. Lucky Place, I have bet him at the start of the season. He was the one that I looked at and thought, if someone's going to come out the woodwork, it's going to be him. He's not been able to come out the woodwork yet, though, because I thought after he first ran at Ascot in that Coral hurdle, the Ascot hurdle, that they'd run him in the long walk, and then they didn't. And then I thought, oh, maybe he's injured. And then they ran him in the real kill, and I thought, oh, good, they can go for the cleave then. And then they haven't run him in the cleave. And for all that Nicky Henderson says he'll stay, and I think he will. I was hoping by now he would have had a bash over 3 miles in a Grade 1, and we'd have seen his rating be a bit higher, because he's got £10+ to find on Tiapu on figures. But at least he's got the reason to make that improvement. The step up in trip could make him a stone better horse. So I like him, but you have to accept the fact that he isn't as good as Tiapu at this point, and he isn't proven at the trip. So again, worried about backing him each way in there. The Wall Park, like I said, potentially could go to the Pertemps, but I think he does look the type similar to like a Lucky Place that could step forward just through racing this season and put a bit of a challenge in there. But the more I go through it, or I start getting further down, I think you can make cases for so many of them that could all fit in the frame. It feels like last year when people were trying to take on Tiapu and saying Crambo was a solid each way bet and stuff, and it doesn't pan out. Have we just reached a point now, Will, where we have to just accept that as much as this is a Grade 1 and it's a championship race, it's just not a very good one this year, and Tiapu sets a standard that really, bar incident, nothing should be able to get close to him, and the even money about him now starts to look like it's generous.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard with horses like this who are campaigned sparingly and we know are going to turn up fresh and well on the day, because we can't get a gauge as to their level of, form or fitness. Not fitness, because we know they're going to be fit, but just their general well-being and form. Yeah. And so to back something at even money at this stage where you don't have that recent evidence of just where they're at, it's not for me. Probably not even for me on the day, really, even if he is strong in the market, etc. And it's probably one of those that you'd want to, actually on the day, see him in the parade ring, see him fit and well. Gordon Elliott's had a good meeting, and then you're thinking, okay, well, he's probably going to run to form and he's probably going to win. That's only the point where, with this type of horse, do I think that's the time to even consider backing up the price that he is. Again, it could be a market where the without market is an interesting option, because I'm not completely sold on Home by the Lee is the second in the market, and then not completely sold that, Lucky Place and the Wool Park are a definite, cast iron, either classy enough or strong stayers enough, or a combination of the both. The one of those two that could probably improve is Lucky Place because of that stepping up in trip angle. But like you, I wouldn't be cast iron guaranteed. I think the one, if you could get a market without each way 3 places and you're getting, I don't know, 9-1, 10-1, then Gal Road, would probably be the one, because he's probably going to finish 3rd, 4th or 5th, you'd imagine. If 1 or 2 others didn't quite run up to their race and he ran his race, which he always does, he might even, fall into 2nd maybe, because he'll keep galloping. But, that's for further down the line. That's for closer to the time. Beyond that, not too many of those at bigger prices that really start to excite, I must admit. It's not a race that I'm overly excited about right now, and probably won't be even nearer the time, I must admit.
Yeah, and that's where I mean about the timeline of it, where the price that Tiapu's been throughout the season, like he's always been defensively enough priced, I think, that given how far out you'd have been betting him to get, say, 5-2 or 3-1 or 7-2, you'd be betting him in the summer, and then you've got to wait a whole season. So the risk attached to that didn't make it scream at value. And then it's just this, it's always there. And like you say, it could be you get to the day like last year when he got smashed, and then you think, oh, well, we definitely know he's off, he looks good and all those sorts of things. But by then he can end up being 1-3. But it's just like at this stage, you don't want to be steaming into even money because, I don't know, you feel like there could be a drift, or I don't know, any sort of those negativity vibes that come out wouldn't make you want to have more on. They'd make you worry about the fact that you've bet him in the first place. One I will just have to say, because I think he needs to be mentioned, is Langadan, right? We touched on him slightly in the Coral Cup, 158 that he's rated. He did win at Aintree last season. He's actually shown that the Coral Cups obviously wasn't a fluke the first time. The spring thing that Dan Skelton talks about, for whatever people think that he's doing it on purpose or he's not, is a fact. He does run better in the spring. And on figures, he doesn't have very much to find with Tiapu if we trust his official rating, which, like I say, he's backed up in graded races in the spring last year. He's 20-1. And when we talk about some of these other ones, like the Gal Road, which I fully accept, he runs to 145s like all these RPRs, isn't it? Like I can't imagine him ever finding anything to go and win this race, but he's definitely going to be there. Like you say, he's the 3rd, 4th, 5th type horse. There is a realm where Langadan could show some of that form from last year and progress a little bit. He loves it at Cheltenham, and the fact that he is stepping up in trip, and it could be the key to find a little bit out of him. Do you think that Langadan could be the fly in the ointment? And where we say that Tiapu's probably defensively priced, like Langadan probably isn't very defensively priced, because they could make him 10-1 and we could make a similar sort of case for him, I reckon. But 20s, does that seem big?
I think for him, I don't know if he's a guaranteed stayer. That's the only thing for me. I think at Aintree, at Sandown, at this level, last year after the Coral Cup win, that's his bang on trip. I think just over 2.5 miles. Suits him perfectly. Don't forget the Coral Cup is on the old course as well, compared to Stayers Hurdle on the new course. So it's not only stepping up in trip, it's also on a lot more stamina required track. So it wouldn't be for me. Like in terms of pure ability, he's probably up there with some of them. But to win a Stayers Hurdle, it's not for me. I could see the angle in that he'll probably run a lot better than he has done. But yeah, not for me.
Yeah, fair enough. Because he's one of those. Because he's another one I've put up. So a couple of friends put him up a long time back, but I've bet him at like a reasonable price. He's one of those. I think I want to make a bit of the case for him because he's 20-1, as opposed to I think he can definitely go and win the race. But again, it's almost like the scratching around type stuff. And I like Tiapu last year was one of those that I feel like everyone was doing the same, was trying to find something to take him on when there was no point trying to take him on. And just because he's never been the juicy prices this year, I'm not like as on side of him as I was last year. He probably does just win this one, doesn't he? But again, I don't know if there are better even money bets. Like I feel like he probably sluices up. But there's something stopped me pulling the trigger, and I've been like this the whole, like say, the timeline through the season. So don't have to bet in every race, do you? And not every even money shot goes and wins, do they? So that's the Stayers Hurdle cover.
What in theory, every other one doesn't. That's why they're even money.
Well, absolutely. I've ended that on such a dim note, haven't I? Let's be more positive. It's a championship race. I'm really excited about it. I'd love to see him go and win it again. It's nice when you get a horse that sets the standard and then manages to maintain it. And it'll be good for Puncher's Town, so we can get stuck into him there as well. Right, on to the plate handicap chase. Another one of these handicaps where we don't know the fields, of course, early enough in there. We might have a bit of a view. But like I say, the Novices Chase being on the same day and on the same course, hopefully logically you wouldn't see too many defections from it unless potentially it's by the same connections, which is my nice little line in here. Because hopefully by the time it gets to Tuesday, we'll have some market confidence behind the fact that Krabilly's going to get redemption for the plate last year, Will. I'm sold on it. And it's probably a stupid bet. Probably shouldn't be advising people on this sort of stuff. So this is, I'm saying this with, it's not tongue in cheek because I have bet him, but he's 10-1 for this race this year. And I think they are going for redemption from last year. Now, I know he doesn't jump the best, but he's comeback run after a bit of a break because he ran in the was it the Silver Trophy? He ran in at Chepstow, and I actually made a bit of a case for him there. I was like, they're going to go pick up this pot at the beginning of the season, then they're going to go win something like the Paddy Power Gold Cup with him. I had this whole thing mapped out for Krabilly being something special this season, and then the drift started. He was installed as 3-1 favourite, drifted out to like 40s or 50s for that Silver Trophy. Then they had a bit of a break, but his run back behind Matata was good over 2 miles. I was starting to think maybe it was a bit too good, but he got dropped £2 for that. Then they had a fairly quick turnaround at the middle trip, ran terribly, you'd think, based on the official form. Got dropped another £2 for it, but it wasn't bad. It was just another little spin for him to get himself, I think, ready for this. And he comes in now off of a lower mark than he was in the race last year when he was sent up for short price favourite. And I don't want to say he was unlucky because jumps is the name of the game, wasn't it? But he definitely could have won the race last year if the race had been rerun a few more times. He wasn't a horse that was never going to win that race. So I think he's got a proper chance. Where I say about the connections as well, Jaguar goes for the Novices, please. Krabilly wins this. If they send Jaguar to this race for any unknown reason, then it would make me very much doubt Krabilly in this race. But I'm sort of, I guess, one-sided in the fact that I do think there's some redemption in there, but he's a horse that I would definitely want to have something else on side with me as well. So I've been pretty blinkered in the fact that I'm just sticking with Krabilly for the time being. I haven't given this plate as much attention as I might do for some of the other handicaps because I guess I'm waiting for the Springer to come from it. So, Will, can you help me find the horse that can probably win it when Krabilly inevitably fails?
Well, it's tricky, this race, because there's a whole host of entries, like you said, that are entered in the Novice Handicap Chase as well. So sifting through which goes to which, you'd imagine most of the novices will run in the Novice Handicap Chase, but sometimes you do find the angle of thought is that because a novice is more unexposed, they actually might be better going in. If they jump and travel well, they might be better going in against older handicappers because they've got more go forward left in them. So that might be the case. And there's, I don't know, probably 15 or 20 horses entered in both. So tricky from that respect, but Krabilly has to be on the shortlist, definitely. Grandeur Dam is on the shortlist for Alan King. He ran a cracker behind, still don't know quite how he got chinned by Moon d'Orange at Trials Day. I think that's generally pretty solid form. The likes of Imperial Saint and Iroko in behind. I think they're rock solid mid 140s to 150s animal, if not slightly better. He's had a fairly quiet season. He can be a good horse who goes well fresh, so he's definitely of interest. And then there's a fair few Irish entries as well who would really be of interest. Most of them I've mentioned in the Novices Handicap Chase as well, the likes of Jordan's, the Company Sergeant, potentially. You could see Pinkerton bouncing back as well. He ran poorly at the DRF, but maybe we'll come back here a bit fresher. Moon d'Orange himself, in this race as well, if he doesn't go for the novices. So, yeah, one of those races in line with the Novice Handicap Chase on the same day that it's tricky getting a proper hand on. I will mention one thing, actually, and this is probably going to be completely derelict because we're recording this on Friday. It is today. Sorry, every day's rolling into one at the minute. And there's a horse running at Warwick today on Friday the 21st. So if you're listening to this later, scroll forward a minute or so if this horse has lost. But Venetia's horse called Demnat, who runs at Warwick today, would need to win today and go up maybe £6 or £7 to get into the realms of the bottom of the plate. Now, he ran in the Kim Muir last year and ran well for a long, long way. And actually, if you compare the two races side by side, despite having had a hefty shower in between the plate and the Kim Muir. For the final circuit, Demnat would have been on the heels of the leaders of the plate, going at the tempo that he was going in his comfort zone. So I think 2.5 miles is probably his trip. Like I said, see if he wins at Warwick today, and then he'll probably be half the price, but still might be an interesting angle because he handled the track really well that day. So he's an interesting horse, but might just be a minute or two's lost there that you can just throw into the ether. And
it's never lost, is it? If it's not this year, it'll be next year. Just Krabilly every year is what I'll keep tipping. Yeah, because it is tricky, but I think it's good as well because it's good to talk with racing folk. It's really good to talk to yourself about this sort of thing because it provides some sort of comfort in knowing that most punters are sat there at home thinking they should have it all figured out by now. But the reality is there are some races that there's probably some value and there's some benefit in betting in them right now, and there are other races where just leave them alone if you want, or if you've got a bit of an interest or your own little angle in there, then it's like it can't be dispelled or poo-pooed. So you don't have to be getting in on everything. One other one I do want to mention here, just because we can clip them up after if we get the winner. If I mention every single horse in the race, I know she doesn't do very well outside of Mare's company, but Panic Attack for Dan Skelton looked like a new mare when she did win on her penultimate start. When they ran her over hurdles last time, I toyed with betting her. I thankfully didn't. She was short enough, and she did get beat, but she still showed a lot of tenacity in that race. That was against the boys, and she has got a massive preference for fences as opposed to hurdles. So the fact that she still ran to that level of ability over hurdles, albeit off of a lower mark because her chase mark has gone up, and I wouldn't say it was necessarily a prep. I think they were just trying to exploit a handicap mark, but she's the type of horse that wouldn't have the fancy profile, wouldn't look to have bundles in hand, but is probably tenacious enough. And I think she is better than the ability that she shows, which is a risk when you're coming into these types of races. But if someone's going to get it out of her for a Cheltenham Festival, it's going to be the Skeltons. And as much as her big day was a couple of starts ago, she might still have a little bit on her to say that she could go all right at a reasonable price. But at the moment, I think she's only about 12 to 1 on her money back. If she's shorter than 25 to 1 on the day, I'd be staggered. So she'd be one that's, I think, worth mentioning now, because as much as she might be a drifter or she might not run in the end, she could be one that's worth sticking in play spots or those block bet type things that I've mentioned before, if you're that way inclined. If not, then don't listen to me. That's fine. You can do what you want. Right. Well, we've made it to the last race on Thursday. It's the Kim Muir Amateur Jockeys Handicap Chase. I know the way you're thinking last year was absolutely hammered up. Probably when I mentioned a Plutard earlier, he's in the realms of that type of horse of like, oh my God, how could that have even got into the handicap and do what he's doing? I mean, it's not the point of this race, but like he strangely would have had a chance in a Gold Cup, wouldn't he? And he didn't get the entry. He's obviously favourite for a Grand National now. That's the type of horse that's in here. So basically, who wins next year's Grand National by taking in the Kim Muir on the way? Because Gavin Cromwell's got a couple of horses in here. Obviously, it was him that trained. I know the way you're thinking. Obviously, he still does. But it was him that got that horse, I guess, partly plotted for the race last year to be so well fancied. Mint Boy and Yeah Man, although we've been afterthought for Yeah Man, but Mint Boy and Yeah Man have been subject to a bit of support. A friend of mine made a couple of cases of them, which are basically just on the Cromwell factor. Say Majest's the one that's probably fairly obvious, I think, for most people, because he was the Coral Cup horse last year that just didn't really do anything. Again, people thinking of JP McManus and William Mullins wanted to get some redemption, but his comeback run where you mentioned Affordale Fury that made the bad mistake, he only went up a few pounds for that. It was one of those where you look at the horse thinking, that was definitely a prep run for coming in to win something at the festival. So I think he rightly deserves to be at the front of the market. But again, it's another race. We've got the JP horses behind, like the Pertemps, and you're not 100% sure which one's going to go where. Johnny, who I've already mentioned for an Ultima, Hashting could go in here. I think he possibly would, but then the National Chase wouldn't be out the realms of possibility for him either. So Say Majest probably is like solid-ish at the front. And then, like I said, a couple of the Cromwell horses I think are probably interesting at bigger prices. But just Say Majest warrant being firstly favourite for this race, and secondly as short as he is, given that he did flop in that Coral Cup last year, or you were a forgiving person?
Yeah. Look, he did, but that was only his third start for Willie Mullins, wasn't it? So still very much acclimatising. He's had a longer time with him, a clearer run, a summer off, and he's looked a decent model over fences, hasn't he? You know, his 2 beginners chase runs were good. Never really put in the race behind Ampere Pass in that Grade 1 at Limerick at Christmas time, and then he won cosily, I thought, beating Affordale Fury at Fairy House. Much will depend on the mark he he gets given. He's 140, obviously, in Ireland. Generally, looking at some of the entries of the Irish horses in over the last couple of weekends, the UK handicapper hasn't been adding too much on to their Irish marks, so you'd think he'd get in here, given this is 145 ceiling. So, yeah, he's of interest, definitely. And it's that kind of profile of a horse that goes well in this race, isn't it? Lightly raced, generally, a few pounds in hand. But you do also find the odd one who's a bit more longer in the tooth, likes Cheltenham, prominent run style, a little bit older, and just sort of goes and does it similarly. But it's hard to find which horses fit those particular bill that are coming in here in a decent vein of form, really. There was one other one that I'm definitely half interested to see what mark she gets, and that's 9 Graces for Barry Connell, because I think she's sneakily going under the radar a little bit. Looks to me like a really strong stayer, and touch wood, she is a sound jumper, because she's gone through her races over fences so far this season pretty nicely. She finished second to La Malmaison in a mare's handicap chase, and then she went and won very, very easily in the amateur riders national under Finian Maguire at Punchestown back in the second week of January. I think she'll only be better stepping up in trip. You'd imagine Finian Maguire will ride again, knows her well. And I thought she was one that might just be a little bit forgotten about maybe in some of the markets when they focus on some of the more likely types, shall we say. But she, to me, is a likely type.
Well, I like that. And the thing is, we've got to remember these on the day, there'll be some probably extended places, but sometimes as well, because the field sizes have been chopped. I mean, there's 24 in this race, but the 5 places you can get anti-post non-runner money back on some of the horses now isn't terrible value. Sometimes it's actually quite good value. And especially in those each way multiples, even if 1 or 2 of them drifts, I mean, you ideally don't want that. But if you get on some of them at the right prices and they shorten up, the place parts alone of those bets are significant, aren't they? It'll be worth just quickly mentioning Transmission in here as well, because for all that I believe that he's going to go to the National Hunt Chase, that's what the trainer said. The reason I was reluctant early in the season to put any content out about how much I liked him for that race was the fear factor of the Kim Muir and the fact that Patrick rode him before, and he still has put an entry in for this race. So thank you for that, Neil Mulholland, for making me sweat for a little bit longer. But it's not beyond the realms of possibility that, as much as I fancy him for National Hunt Chase, he decides to come here, and he would be of interest to me whichever race he goes. My case made for him for the National Hunt Chase, and the fact that I think he is like the Dower stayer, I think that's the better race for him to go in. But obviously the trainers know more than I do. So if Transmission was to come here, I'd be interested. I've got a small bit on him, non-runner money back, because I've bet him so much for the National Hunt Chase. So be remiss of me not to mention him in here, but I do think the horse is good. He just doesn't scream out to me for this type of race that he's got loads in hand, whereas most often the winner of this race has got bundles in hand, and I don't think he needs to have as much in hand for the test of a National Hunt Chase as this. But it's me talk about another race again. Right, Will, we've successfully completed Thursday of the Cheltenham Festival. Surely by now we've tipped up a couple of winners, but what would have been our best bet for Thursday, or what would be your best bet that you could put out to the viewers? Like I say, it gets harder as the week goes on, but we've got Galopin de Champs for tomorrow, so we'll be fine.
Yeah. Best bet, probably. I mean, there's a few at bigger prices that I haven't backed as yet, but are certainly looking to. Let me think very quickly.
It does get harder as the week goes on, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Isn't a bad thing, even if it's an each way one or.
Yeah, look, I think if he does run here, then Jordan's in the novice handicap chase.
Lovely. And again, non-runner money back, so you can get involved now. And then if he doesn't turn up in this one, then no harm done.
16-1 non-runner money back, so not bad.
Decent. I'm struggling, Will. I was hoping actually then that I could have just cut the video and I could have stopped there. It's hard. I feel like, I mean, I've obviously got to say something, but this is the reality of it, rather than it just being me writing something out and saying to you, this is my best bet for the day. I prefer that people see that I'm struggling, because then at least, the conviction's not quite there. So
I mean, for me, in essence, backs a file, in the Ryanair, if he goes there, that would be it if you ask me for a winner.
All right, I'll take that one as well. Then I was thinking just the same. I'm definitely being greedy. Like 6-4 non-runner money back about him is not a terrible price at all. I think you can get 13-8 about him as well. So yeah, I haven't bet factor 5 for the Ryanair yet. I normally leave that race till closer, but I'm going to back my own tip. I'll say Factor 12 for the Ryanair, but come on, I've picked one of the shortest favourites on the Thursday. I will do better for tomorrow, so stay tuned. Day 4's video will be out very soon.